Welcome to IMS, George. Obviously, Radio 1 is a huge station in the UK and has a massive impact globally. Can you just talk me through some examples of the impact that actually Radio 1's had internationally, and also a little bit about your role and what it consists of?
I'll start with just briefly what I do at Radio 1 and Radio 1 Extra. So my title's the head of music, and I take responsibility for the music policy on both stations, basically. So the music that you hear, particularly on daytime, during mainstream hours on Radio 1 and 1 Extra, stands or falls really by me. So obviously I've got a team of people that work for me, helping to kind of select the music and work on what we call the playlist. Radio 1, there's 50 current records on the playlist every week, and it's a really wide range of music. I mean, hopefully some of you have heard the station, but obviously we play everything from electronic music to rock. It's really a genreless radio station. The kind of, the other thing, the process, do you want me to go into a little bit about the process behind it now?
Yeah.
In a minute. Yeah. The actual process, the decision-making process, is really key to Radio 1, because one of the key aspects of the station is that we really support new music very, very clearly. And it's something that we absolutely, as far as I'm concerned, stand or fall by. How many new artists, new tracks we're developing, how many we actually break. Because in the UK, there's often questions asked about why the BBC should be funded or should be funding a popular music radio station, and the reason is that we will take risks that commercial radio wouldn't take. I mean, it's really one of the fundamental reasons. And at any moment in time, we are developing artists that at some point may well cross over, not all of them, because obviously the range that we do is enormous, but some of them will grow, some of them will cross over, and I do what we call the heavy lifting work quite often for commercial radio, so that once they're hits, once they're established, commercial radio can take them over and support them. Remind me the other bit of the question, because it was a two-part question. Sorry, Chris.
But yeah, one thing you didn't touch on was I mentioned the global influence of Radio 1.
So Radio 1 obviously is on FM in the UK, but we're also online. So we do have a global audience that listen online. We make a lot of visual content that goes up on YouTube. So we've got a platform on YouTube where people can see what we're up to. We're also on Sirius in the States as well, so there's quite a large audience, although Sirius won't tell us how large in America as well. But the influence goes beyond that. We've got an international reputation, and just as a for instance, I went to see Doug Morris last May when he was still at Universal, and he goes, look, every week on Monday morning when they kind of have the senior management team meeting, they get the Radio 1 playlist up, and any artists, any records that we've added from the previous week that they don't know what they are, they want to know. They want to talk about them. They want to listen to the song. And it's the same really at all of the US majors. But then it's other radio programmers as well, like the head of music equivalent of myself at Triple J in Australia. You know, he keeps a close eye on what we've added onto the playlist. So, and other formats right around the world. So the kind of the power of Radio 1 goes way beyond just the audience directly in the UK that listen to what we do.
Okay, and after this there will be some speed pitching sessions, people pitching their music to you. Can you talk me through what kind of stuff you'll be looking for? Obviously this is all very much dance orientated, and
yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's going to be about a few things, but obviously originality. If you've got a USP, you're doing something different, that's always going to stand out. It's very rare that I hear something really fresh and different, but when you do hear it, it's going to be a killer. Great songwriting, obviously strong hooks. For daytime radio, obviously length, duration matters as well. If you're talking specialist shows, it can be any length, but obviously when it gets to daytime, you really ideally want to be between 3 minutes and 4 minutes, and within that song structure, you want an exciting journey. Particularly in electronic music, I think that's the case. Great short, sharp edits that really shrink the long-form journey down to something a little bit tighter. But the song's really key as well. I mean, really, really important. But again, when and if you come up with something that is different and original, maybe mashing together different sounds, different styles, you've got a unique voice, you've got a different approach to music making, then clearly that, when it does occur, is going to be something absolutely exciting that we're looking for.
Okay, and back in London, how does the selection process work? How does a playlist of meetings?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know how many of you, I'll assume you're not that familiar with Radio 1, but from 7 o'clock in the evening, literally until 4 o'clock the following morning, we have specialist music shows. And it runs the gamut, but we've got lots and lots of electronic and dance music shows on the station. All of those specialist shows, they're there because they're employed really as super experts in their own field. And really, to be on Radio 1, you've got to have been able to make noise. You've got to have made a mark for yourself already, because in the UK, certainly, it's the height of a broadcasting career, really. And so a lot of them do obviously have, such as Pete, have worldwide followings. Giles Peterson has huge worldwide following. And we're looking for these guys to obviously act as an efficient filtering system, seeking out from the incredible amount of music that's out there now, the best, the most interesting, the most exciting, the hottest new music. Then it's partly my job to have a system, and I call it our radar system, set up to make sure that we're not missing things that are really exciting. And I kind of say we stand or fall really on our decision-making process by how good that radar system is. So we have a pre-playlist meeting on a Tuesday. 1 week it's electronic and dance music. The following week it's kind of rock and alternative. And the specialist DJs don't come themselves, but they recommend tracks to their production team, and somebody from the production team comes to that meeting. And at the end of it, there's 3 or 4 records that get presented to the main playlist meeting on a Wednesday. And I've got about 12 people around a table, half men, half women, different ages, different tastes, different backgrounds. And then we collectively sit down, I chair the meeting, and we go through about 20 or 30 records. Obviously, there's another filtering process, but I don't want to get too detailed here, because we get presented in a week with hundreds of new records, potentially. And in the end, we're only listening to 30. And of those 30, perhaps somewhere between 5 and 10 on average will get added to the playlist. So it's really all about that filtering process. The other thing I haven't mentioned is, and I know there's obviously lots of international music makers here, but Radio 1 has to also strongly support UK music. We have to play 40% UK music every single week. And it's one of the justifications, again, for the station that we support and nurture UK music in particular. But obviously, if you look at the playlist, it doesn't really matter where you're from. If you're making extraordinary music, we're going to find you and we're going to play you. Okay,
obviously Radio 1's remit is a young audience, and I'm not trying to say you're old, but you're not of the same age as that target audience. So I mean, how do you kind of keep in touch with that kind of demographic?
Well, it's absolutely, obviously, vital that I do, and I do that in a few ways. Really, we've got a very young production team at Radio 1. Clearly, we spend a lot of time trying to understand the audience. Obviously, we've got social networking in place. So, as part of this radar system, we can really find out what's going on in conversations. There's lots of dialogue with the programs, really, about, especially the specialist programs, about the music that we like or that they like. A lot of our DJs are obviously out in clubs, DJing for young audiences. They can tell what's working. We also, well, in my case, I've got a 16-year-old son and a 12-year-old son, and they're really into music in a very big way, and they tip me off about stuff all the time. So I've got in-house team as well that help me out. My 12-year-old on Boxing Day, he was subscribed to the UKF Dubstep channel, and he goes, "Dad, this video went up yesterday from a band called Mode Step. I think you want to listen to this one." So I did. I liked it. I thought, my God, he's right. This is a hit. Went in on the 2 days later into work, contacted the label and said, "Love this Mode Step track. I'm going to playlist it." And we put it on the day later, and now they're signed to Universal. And it was just that quick from my 12-year-old basically recommending a track. So it does happen. But obviously, all the people that we employ at Radio 1 are madly passionate about music. It's one of the reasons they came to the station. And, a lot of them are in their early 20s, absolutely our target audience. they're living the life, they're listening to tons of music, they're going out clubbing, they're going out to gigs. And it's my job to make sure, as I say, this radar system that we have set up is really capturing what's going on out there.
Okay, and obviously dance as a genre is doing incredibly well in the UK and overseas. You've been head of music for about 6 years, haven't you?
Yeah, nearly. It'll be 6 years in October.
So I'm just interested to know sort of how much, what the key things you've done since you've been in that role to support dance music, really, and how the output has moved into that towards that genre.
I mean, it's worth saying. It kind of goes without saying, but I will say it, that music moves in cycles, and across time, the audience taste changes. It comes in waves. And for instance, in the UK, 3 years ago now, British guitar bands were ruling the roost, and dance music and UK urban music were at a low point in the cycle. Now, and it's been evolving for the last almost a year, in fact for the last year now, certainly it's felt as though dance music, electronic music in the wider sense is being on a very much back on the upward curve. And when I say that, obviously it comes from the underground. The underground's always there, but it's when it reaches out beyond the underground and starts crossing over progressively into the mainstream. And essentially that's what's happened. And Radio 1 is always there to kind of reflect. We do lead a bit, because obviously chasing new music means that we do have a lot of influence. But obviously if you get too far ahead of the curve, then the audience don't understand what you're doing. You lose your audience. And one of the things about Radio 1 is the reach. The reach that we have is so enormous. I mean, we have 13 million listeners a week just in the UK, never mind globally. I mean, nearly half of every 15 to 24-year-old in the UK listens to Radio 1 every week. I mean, it's quite phenomenal, the reach. And to do that and to maintain the influence that we have, you have to have the scale, so that when you do bring something new, something different through, it's balanced between other things that they feel more comfortable with. And that's how you make a change, because you become too specialist, your audience goes, you can't make the difference. So we do this careful balancing act, which is worth mentioning. And I've lost the thread of where we began that question now. Do you remember where we started?
Well, we were talking about you being there 6 years and what you've
done.
Oh,
yeah. Okay, I'll talk about our specialist shows a little.
The focus on dance, yeah. Obviously, you've got the 12 hours on a Friday night, which is an amazing
I'll talk about the specialist output. So, obviously, our specialist shows, absolutely vital to what we do as well. And we're always looking for new talent. We're always looking for the DJs that are making waves out in the market. And it's a combination of people that are obviously making waves, they're getting a following, in many cases now obviously making music themselves. I mean, Scream and Benga will be an instance that's worth mentioning. But they also need to achieve a certain level of broadcasting skill, and obviously we give them the opportunity to come on board and improve that as well, because clearly being on the radio you need to be a good communicator, and you need to get over that passion and enthusiasm for the music that you're going to play, unless it's a pure mix show. So we're always looking. We're always looking. We get lots of demos in, but it's not enough to just, again, listen to demos. Clearly, you've got to have your ear to the ground. You've got to see who's out there, who's getting club bookings, who's got a good following in social networking space, maybe who's got an incredible blog. And it's those kind of people, really. To get on Radio 1, you really need to be, making some waves out in the business.
Okay, and in terms of the special, I mean, we've got, as I mentioned, that 12 hours of solid dance music on a Friday. How close, because a lot of your focus has to be on a daytime output, but how closely do you actually monitor the dance specialist?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, we have this meeting on a Tuesday afternoon, which is really, really fundamentally important to capturing what's going on in the specialist shows. And representatives from more or less all of the dance music shows will come every other week to that meeting and bring up the most exciting records that are going on there. But equally, I mean, myself and my team are always in dialogue with the DJs as well. And we're always asking them or their producers to tip us off about the most exciting records. Plus, we just go in and have a look at what they're playing as well anyway. So, I mean, they are really, really important to what we're doing. I mean, 75% of the records on our playlist of 50 records every week, most of those, well, in fact, that 75% have grown out of our specialist shows. So it is really important.
Okay, and obviously Pete Tong's been at Radio 1 now for celebrating his 20th anniversary with you guys. How important has he been as a figurehead and an influence at the station?
I mean, Pete's been really seriously important. I mean, I mentioned this last night for a few people that were here, but in 1993, Radio 1 underwent a revolution. It had an enormous amount of listeners, but there was a new mandate from top management that Radio 1 had to drive itself back younger. It had to be more cutting edge, more relevant. And Pete had been on the station for a couple of years at that point, and he knew everybody, obviously, in dance music and electronic music and beyond. And the controller really used Pete as a sounding board, both for his contacts and in terms of his recommendations of who he should bring on the station at the time. So Pete really did lay the foundations for kind of the current era, the last 20 years, 17 years of Radio 1. So a hell of a lot of the dance DJs have come through via recommendations from Pete. And
he was obviously integral, really, to Radio 1 coming to Ibiza. What is that an ongoing commitment now? Is that something that you're building, or what are your sort of future plans? Really?
Yeah, I mean, Radio 1 is very much committed to Ibiza, and we're back this year. I mean, I can't say too much about the plans, but August the 5th, it'll be at Space, and we've got an incredible lineup. Pete's going to announce it a week on Friday, June the 3rd. He'll unveil who's playing for us. But yeah, no, we've got a very strong ongoing commitment to coming to Ibiza.
Okay, and moving into a sort of slightly different subject for a minute. We've in the UK a big hot topic really is on air on sale, and tracks getting delivered to radio at the same time they're getting delivered to retail, and that's people have got very sort of different opinions on it. The obvious idea is to kind of combat piracy. Do you think that will work, and what do you feel about it? It's interesting. I mean, it's a mixed bag as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's really a hot topic amongst the business in the UK. And for those of you who don't know, I won't make an assumption here, Universal Music and Sony have pretty much mandated that over 90%, maybe over 95% of everything they release now has to be available to buy the minute it goes to radio, or within 24, 48 hours of going to radio. It's a hell of a commitment, and one of the reasons behind that is political, frankly, in that the UK government was saying, well, what are you doing to combat piracy? What do you mean you're allowing records to be on the radio for 6, 7, 8 weeks and the audience can't get them? Of course they're going to go and get them illegally. So Universal and Sony felt that, well, they had to be seen to be doing something. Warner's and EMI, the other two majors, majority of their releases are still the old-fashioned way where you build up demand over a few weeks at radio, and then you release the floodgates, and hopefully you get a high new entry in the chart. And in the UK, the chart is still really important. I mean, the volume of single sales in the UK is enormous. In fact, you were saying it's gone up 35% year on year, which is quite extraordinary because the volumes are massive now. So it's really very important to try and get a top 40 hit, but only if that is your game. And as far as I'm concerned, the way Radio 1 looks at the music and the artists that we support, it's only relevant for certain sections of the market. So if you tell me you're aiming to have a top 40 hit, and for you that's the be-all and end-all, of course, then we're going to measure you on your success in the top 40. But lots of the most exciting and innovative music that we play isn't necessarily aimed at single sales, or will take a while before that artist tips and the public get them. I mean, it's not something in dance music or electronic music, but I'm going to cite just one example. Mumford & Sons, for instance, which in the UK we started supporting. I mean, I was listening to them for about a year, just over a year, before we started taking really seriously an interest in putting them on the playlist. But the first record that we heavily committed to, I remember researching it. I'll get on to research in a minute. And the audience just really didn't get the sound at all. But we believed in it, and we A-listed the following single. And by the time we'd played that 100 times, the audience had started to change their minds. And
and they thought, you know what, there is something in this. I mean, obviously Mumford & Sons have been out playing live and they've done work themselves, but the story changed, and it's partly, probably quite largely, to the support that Radio 1 was giving the band. And then they go on and become an enormous phenomenon in the UK and globally and the US. And that came from a belief that, frankly, you know, some other stations possibly wouldn't have gone there in the first place, or if they had and they'd struggled with the first single that they committed to and got no top 40, pulled off the project, boom, gone. So it's really, really important. But then there's other things that clearly, if you're at an early stage in your career, there is a benefit to potentially building up exposure, because really it's about awareness at the end of the day. How much awareness does the audience have for your project? And that can come in different ways. I mean, there's an act at the moment that had a sync, Temple Cloud, had a sync in the UK. They didn't even have a deal. It was just on an ad. And Shazam, which is really, as far as I'm concerned, a brilliant research tool now, it went straight to #1 in Shazam on the back of an advert. All of the labels obviously wanted to have a look at the record and sign it. I mean, it's quite an interesting phenomenon. So all their awareness came from the ad. And frankly, they could have probably released it at any point in the last few weeks, and it would have gone straight into the top 20, if not better. So it is just about building up awareness, and however you want to do that. And obviously, there's myriad ways of doing it. It could be a great, incredible YouTube video now, but awareness is the key.
You were going to go into your research techniques, I think. You touched on research there. I'd be interested to know a bit more about that.
Yeah. I mean, I should have mentioned it in terms of how we understand the audience, to be honest. Now, we don't do predicative research at all, because, again, if you do that, you find the audience telling you they don't like the record and you don't play it. We never do that, because if you're actually going to make a difference, if you're actually going to change the way people hear music, the way they discover acts, and the belief, you have to commit. And that's what we do. So we only test records once we're heavily down the line with them. But it's a brilliant way of understanding the audience, and you can really see trends developing. So, you know, we could see the fall-off of interest in British guitar music through it very early. We could see, you know, recently the rise of absolutely electronic music and dance music, again, in the opposite direction. And we test 12 to 30-year-olds. We do it every week with about 400 people taking part. And it's a really useful tool, again, to understand what the audience are into.
Okay, great. You mentioned earlier on that obviously you know, there is a cyclical nature in terms of different genres become popular and the popularity falls away and another, you know, trend comes along, if you like. And that does tend to, you know, repeat itself to a certain extent. At the moment, dance is obviously doing very well. Single sales are up in the UK anyway, 30% on last year. And, you know, we're talking about whether you're sort of leading or following, but how firm is your commitment to dance music? Obviously, you've got to reflect the wider popularity of genres, but how firm is your commitment to dance?
Well, simply massive. I'll say that. I mean, dance music at the moment is really, really important to what we're doing. And if you look at, our playlist, you can get it up online. You can just see the amount of records that we're supporting that have come from the electronic space. And in dance music in the wider sense, you know, obviously from dubstep records through to, I guess, you know, I was talking to somebody yesterday, I was saying, you know, 20 years ago, Aloe Black would have been considered a dance record as it came out of the soul space. You know, Aloe Black's our best testing record at Radio 1 this week. But Pitbull, #1, David Guetta, all over the charts. Obviously, there's a synchronicity between what we play and the UK Top 40. There is a very close connection, and clearly there's so many records coming out of both the UK and America that are essentially dance records. Or, I mean, as you all know, you know, it's pretty obvious. All the big US artists now working with dance producers. I mean, Timbaland's next project, it's dance records on it. If you're not working with dance producers now, you're probably not going to have hits.
When you started out pretty early on in your career in radio, you actually won a very prestigious award for a documentary, A History of the Remix, I understand. It was back in '89. So just personally, I'm just interested to know how much you're interested in dance, really. Obviously, it seems that you have a passion for it. Yeah.
I mean, dance music, if there's one, I mean, obviously, to do my job, you have to have very eclectic taste. But frankly, dance music and electronic music, that's kind of the core base of my own passion in music, really. And I mean, it started as a teenager going out clubbing. I used to go to the Warehouse Club in Leeds, and it was a period post-punk, new wave music, but also the arrival of 12 inches and remixes, a lot of the US dance stuff that was coming out at the time, Arthur Baker remixes, Shep Pettibone remixes, and I love dancing. So, you know, that was a fundamental thing. I loved dancing in the first place, and the records just got me. So I was buying a hell of a lot of music. And when I actually joined Radio 1 in 1989 as a trainee producer, the reason they took me on, and there was only one job and there were 2,000 applicants, was because there was nobody almost on the station that knew anything about hip-hop or dance music. And I was a young kid at the time, and that's what excited me. That's what they were kind of looking for. So that was like my extra USP on top of the experience that I had. So, I mean, it really has been central to kind of my career. I worked at KISS. Again, some of you have heard of KISS in London. From when that station went legal, I produced all of the specialist shows on KISS for the first 5 years. And again, lots and lots of legendary DJs were working on the station at the time. So no, I mean it's an absolute passion of mine. I used to have a ridiculous collection of dance records, 12 inches, 25,000. I mean, I sold most of them now, but yeah, I mean, you know, I couldn't afford the storage anymore. So it's a huge passion of mine.
Okay, great. And during your time at Radio 1, I mean, can you give some examples of, because obviously, you know, we were talking about your focus on new music. Just be interested to know of some of the sort of real breakthroughs you've had in terms of supporting new dance acts.
Over the years?
Yeah, over the years, and which are the real highlights for you?
I mean, I mentioned a few. The Prodigy, start with the Prodigy. I've even got a credit on the first Prodigy album, actually. And that was, again, at KISS. And I got a test press, one of the very, very early test presses of the Prodigy, and just loved it straight away and supported them from there, really, at KISS. Fortunately, obviously, a couple of the DJs got it as well. And between sort of my love for it, it happened. Another one, Norman Cook's first record, Don't Be Good To Me, Beats International. I was at Radio 1 producing Gary Davis, I think it's here somewhere, he might even be in the audience out there, I don't know. I was producing Gary Davis on Radio 1 on the lunchtime show, and I got the first acetate that Norman Cook, still got it actually, first acetate that he cut on that. Somebody brought it into me and said, you've got to listen to this. I went, oh my God, that's incredible, and got it on the radio that day, and hopefully helped Norman out. What else? The Streets. First Streets, again, I think there were about 10 test presses of that originally. I remember getting one of those, going, oh my God, this is just incredible, getting that on the radio, and rest is history. I mean, I could go on and on. There's loads. And again, it's an area in particular, as I said, that I'm just so passionate about, and I'm glad that I've been able to, you know, help out a few acts over the years.
Great stuff. Okay, anybody with any questions? Come on, there must be some questions. He's a very powerful man in radio.
Does everything get listened to?
You know what? I'd like to say it does. It's impossible. I mean, the amount of music that gets made now is, I mean, it's a good thing. I keep saying to people, what's happened is that obviously there's been a democratization of the music business. It's so cheap and easy to make tracks now that, I mean, it's unprecedented in the history of music. There's thousands of people making tracks, from obviously cut up simple DJ beat bits through to much more produced stuff. But as a result of that, we get inundated with music. I mean, every specialist DJ that I talk to, I mean, is telling me that, you know, they get somewhere between 200 and 500 new tracks a week sent to them. And obviously, a lot of people within the station, and me included, spend a hell of a lot of time, you know, listening to stuff, because we don't want to miss something. You know, it's our job to try and find the most exciting new bits that are out there. And clearly, we set ourselves up as a filter, and we stand or fall by that. But it is simply impossible to do it. I mean, the only good thing about that is that there's actually more good music around than there ever has been before, although it's hard to find it. But there's equally absolutely way more shit than there ever was before. I mean, it's unbelievable. and there's still probably only about the same amount of cream at the top of it all, the incredible stuff. That certainly hasn't seemed to have increased. In fact, it's probably decreased, actually. But in the good bracket, and good often is good enough, there's loads.
So is there anything you can advise us to do to ensure it gets listened to?
There's no simple answer to that other than you creating a story yourself. Because if you come to us and you've already got some kind of plot developing, then we're obviously going to take more note. So, you know, if you've got other people that we trust recommending you or playing your record, or if you've got a YouTube video up of some kind and you've got views, I mean, if you know, there's a bunch of ways, but certainly getting some kind of story, some kind of following is really important now. And to be honest, there isn't an excuse anymore for not having that, because your competitors are out there doing that. And, you know, I would say it is possible to have a good track that doesn't get heard, doesn't get discovered because you haven't made noise, but you've got to. That's the extra thing, because somebody else has also made a great track, as good as yours, but they've done the work. They've made the noise. Okay.
Just a curious question. What's your favourite show on Radio 1?
My favourite show on Radio 1? Oh, boy, don't do that. No, I'm not sure I can fairly answer that, although... Do you know what? Okay, between you and me, no. I love them all, but Zane Lowe's show is incredible. I'll give hats off to Zane. I think he's an incredible DJ. He's an incredible broadcaster, incredible presenter. I love the fact that he's able to also, personally, again, partly because I've got eclectic taste, I like the fact that he can choose a great range of music and support it. And then if you've ever seen him in a club or pre a gig, he's one of the most incredible live DJs out there. He's just incredible.
Hi there. I come from Dubai, where all the radio stations are very commercial. How important is the kind of international listening market to you and the online listening market?
Well, the simple answer to that is that the BBC, who obviously govern Radio 1, actually don't really care about the international market. Now, we do personally, because obviously we want to be successful and we want to make sure that everybody everywhere, you know, has time for what we do and likes what we do. But we're actually judged, in theory, by the UK market and how well we're doing in the UK. And that's simply because of the license fee model that the BBC has, that everybody in the UK, if you own a television set, has to pay a license. And that's how the system works. And radio gets a small cut of that money, that income, and therefore we're responsible to the UK market. But obviously for us, we do kind of take an interest in how well things are doing internationally. But again, we're not measured by that. So personally, yeah, great. But we don't absolutely stand or fall by that. Although if we're employing the right DJs, as far as I'm concerned, they should be DJs that are able to get international interest.
Yeah, I mean, I brought Zayn out for the first time to Dubai, and he, got on really well, and everybody loved him. So I think there is quite a big international.
There is. I mean, obviously, most of our specialist DJs do get to travel abroad. They get bookings all over the world.
Pete's there 5 times a year.
Yeah, completely. I mean, pretty much all of them now you'll find festivals or events in most major territories. And the only thing is that Radio 1's kind of a bit of a ball and chain sometimes, in that we want them to do their shows live, and that kind of does restrict travel a little bit, apart from holidays that we allow them to have occasionally.
Hi, Darrell from the International Radio Festival. How many listeners do you have worldwide?
Do you know what? I don't actually know the global reach, unfortunately. I can't answer that. I mean, I'd be intrigued to know, but I don't actually know. No, I don't.
No idea whatsoever?
No. I mean, certainly our online streams do have significant global audiences. So but it's in the millions, but I don't know how many.
Is it mainly the English-speaking world?
Japan. I mean, Japan as well, I know for sure. So it's not just the English-speaking world. It's everywhere. Germany. I mean, to be honest, because the UK music market has a global kind of following, and a lot of our DJs, as I say, are making music or involved with music or playing music that has an international audience. It's really everywhere, not just English speaking.
Do you ever stop any of your specialist DJs from playing music?
We don't. If there is anything that's particularly controversial, We discuss it, we have a look at it, and we decide whether it needs an edit or whether it needs to be in a particular show at a particular time, or whether it needs a warning on it. But there's more or less nothing now that we wouldn't play at some point in time. I mean, we've had, I know recently, a few weeks ago, we had an incredibly sexually explicit record going out, but it was very late at night, and it was discussed in advance to make sure there was an appropriate warning. I can't remember the title.
Hi, George. Lately, BBC's been pushing in new music we trust quite a lot, and there's quite a lot of online content to support artists. How do you see that developing with the nurturing of new talent in the future?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as I say, we're not doing our job right if we're not bringing new talent through and trying it out on air. We do demo people. I mean, I haven't again talked about that. We do demo people behind the scenes as well on a regular basis, just to see what potential is there. And just in the same way that if we're missing records, we're not doing our job. If we're missing DJ talent, we're not doing our jobs. And again, it's very competitive. And to be honest, probably with the club scene again, an interest in dance music and electronic music growing again, I think it's going to get more competitive. But it also means there's probably more people out there potentially for us to have a look at. So it's going to be quite an exciting time, I think, in the next couple of years again for both DJ talent and records.
You mentioned there was a quota on 40% of English music, British music. I know you've been working with AIM recently, but is there a quota on independent labels over majors?
No, but the good news is there's an incredible amount of independent music on our playlist every week, and there's no official quota. I mean, I really hate quotas. I think it's a really dangerous game because if we're going to maintain the enormous audience and the enormous ability to influence the market, you have to have a certain degree of freedom. Even, you know, I mean, to be honest, the 40% UK is something that we absolutely have to achieve. It's quite tough sometimes, though, and what it actually means is that some good records that don't come from the UK, we literally have to keep them on a low rotation and promote UK stuff. It's fine, acceptable, it's what we do, it's what we're paid to do. The more restrictions that you put on the station, the more damaging I think it is to the output. But the fact is that independent labels, I mean, I think they're going to, I mean, they are entering a golden era right now anyway, to be honest, because they look beyond the borders, they take the risks, and Radio 1's very much in that, going down, well, it is down that road. We're not just entirely about supporting the most commercial records, the most the biggest hitting records, because commercial radio do that. We play some of those records, but we're always looking for the people that are making the innovative sounds. And, you know, a significant amount of that music is without any doubt going to come from the independent sector. I mean, I'm going to just cite one example. I mean, a guy called J. Paul on XL Recordings at the moment that's coming up. You know, I mean, some of the majors were after him, to be fair, but he went to the Right Home. It is an independent label. They let him do what he wanted to do. I've heard a lot of the tracks. He's on the playlist right now. He's already been sampled by Beyonce and Drake. He's an incredible talent, and he's with the Right Home, which is an independent label that kind of let the artists do what they do. And I'm not knocking majors, by the way, because obviously they also do have exciting, innovative artists on the books. But I think a lot of independent labels really get the picture that if you're going to try and compete in the pop space, you're just not going to be able to. And it's kind of my advice always to independent labels is if you're going to go into the top 40 pop space, trying to make pop records, you're probably heading for disaster. But if you find a genuine artist that's real, that's making interesting, innovative music, you've got a real chance of success. And that's kind of my advice always. It's you've got to have incredible marketing muscle behind kind of pop act to get through. You need big budget videos. You need a commitment to tour. And it's tough, but it's kind of the way it is. But on the margins, on the fringes, the most exciting, interesting, innovative artists, yeah, a lot of them are independents.
Time for just one more, I think.
Hi, my name's Victoria Aiken and I'm a singer. And what I've noticed, like, there's lots of different promo companies around that, you know, claim to sort of send their tracks to you, but you never know which ones are good, which ones are bad. I mean, they all say the same thing. We put it in their box, you know. So I was just wondering which are the better ones out there that you pay attention to?
I definitely can't answer that question. A few of them are in the audience here as well. No, I can't answer that. The only way you can do it is really by approaching them, talking to them, and finding out what other records they've broken. And then you make your own mind up. Ask them what stories they've got to tell. What have you taken into Radio 1 or radio, and what's actually gone on to be successful? And the ones that have got strong stories and you believe them, well, there you go. You'll be able to choose.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.